WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM's Master of Business Administration is designed to accommodate the career needs of professionals across a variety of work organizations. More information at business.udmercy.edu.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. Today on the program, an event this weekend will dive into the work of Jane Jacobs and the consequences of the ways we construct our cities.
But first on the Metro. For some, basketball is just fun, but for others, it's a dream of a better future. Several Michigan high school athletes have already signed up to play college basketball next year. But before that time comes, a few of them will get a chance to play against each other. This Saturday at 4 p.m. in Novi, Dreamz Two Reality will host its first All-American basketball game, showcasing Michigan's top 20 high school basketball players before they head off to college. To discuss the game and what it could mean for the students, we have Roy Jackson with us. He is the Dreamz Two Reality Basketball owner and founder. Roy, welcome to the Metro.
I appreciate it.
Well, let's just start with the idea of this Dreamz Two Reality basketball game. Why did you even decide to start it in the first place?
Well, I played professional basketball 7 years overseas, and I always wanted to give back to the kids because I know how hard it is nowadays. So I thought about it. I got my logo from my son. He was actually holding a basketball, so I made him the logo, and I'm like, this should be Dreamz Two Reality because one day he'll be old enough to play in this game. And I got a lot of kids hitting me up all over the Midwest, and I'm just like, let me just create a platform that'll be in Michigan for a while that'll give kids the opportunity to display their talent.
So when you say you have kids who are contacting you around the Midwest, what are they reaching out to you for specifically?
Specifically, they reach out to me for recruitment. So what Dreamz Two Reality is, it's a recruitment service that I've created. And I have contacts with over 150 college coaches. And that's from junior college level all the way to Division I. So once they reach out to me, I just need their grades, I need their film, and then I send it into my recruitment service to all 150 coaches, and then they reach back to me which players they like.
So what you kind of serve as is a conduit between players and coaches, especially those or some who might feel like they're being under-recruited or want opportunities to go to different colleges.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that then, we do have other showcases like the McDonald's All-American Game, Jordan Bland, Nike Hoops Summit, you know, the ones I think of seeing players on. Why a Michigan-specific one like you're trying to pull off here on Saturday?
Because Michigan, we got talent, and I feel like it need to be displayed. And one day, I hope it does be as big as like the McDonald's All-American Game and the Jordan Brand Classic. Because like I say, like, we got 14 Division I signees that didn't make it to the Jordan Brand or the McDonald's All-American, but they still are All-Americans. And I'm like, I'm from Michigan, so let me bring this platform here. In 2, 3, 4 years from now, you never know how big it might get.
You said they're all Americans. How many All-Americans are there throughout the country in a given year?
I know, like with the McDonald's All-American Game, it's only 20.
Right.
And you know how many kids it is. It's so many kids, it's great to get passed up. And I know, like in Michigan, I can't reach all the kids, but the ones that I can grasp, I want to get them and put them on that platform. And then maybe next year, I could get all the other ones. Then next year, just keep building and building.
All right. So let's talk about the game a little bit itself, right? We've got the game. There's going to be a slam dunk contest, 3-point shootout. What should people expect at the game that's going to happen?
Oh, they should expect a lot of excitement, you know, raffle giveaways. I even got TNT Slam Dunk Champion 2015, Porter Mayberry. Like he's jumped over Shaquille O'Neal. I got him coming in.
Now, did he jump over Shaquille O'Neal? Was like with knees bent, or is it the one where if you just get the midsection over, the legs are hanging off of him? I mean, there's different ways of jumping over a 7-foot man.
Oh no, he jumped over.
Okay, clear over.
He cleared him.
Oh, okay. What else is going to be going on there, though?
I got like Samaj Morgan, you know, Rose Bowl national champion. Nick Marsh, who signed with Michigan State. Jeremiah Beasley signed with Missouri. Like, these are all football players. I got Antonio Smith, Albert White, you know, coaching.
You said football players, though. So that means some of the recruits who made it to school, not just basketball talent, we're just talking about some athletes there. So some of these scholarship players are going to be playing football?
They actually, they playing football, but I got them as the slam dunk judge.
The judges. Now I understand. All right, so it's an opportunity then, it sounds like, especially if you haven't had a chance to see some of the talent that we have here in basketball in Michigan, one place where you can see really some of the up-and-coming talent graduating this year, all in one place.
All in one place.
All right, very good. So outside of the basketball game itself, or before we move off of it, what does the winner get? I mean, is this just for pride, or?
Oh no, the slam dunk champion get a big trophy, the 3-point contest get a trophy. I got the MVP trophy, and then all 20 athletes are gonna get a medal, just like for participation. I got Dreamz Two Reality All-American certificates, and also I got Governor Whitmore to give 20 certificates to the players. Oh,
so is she going to be there, or are they signed? Do you know how that's going to happen?
I really don't know if she's going to be there, but I know I just got the certificates from her in the mail today.
Awesome. So then let's think about the players who are involved, right? Because some of them have already been signed to schools, as you mentioned. Why are they playing in this game? What do they get out of it?
I wanted them to have the last opportunity to play high school basketball, in front of a packed crowd, and also in front of players that they probably never played against. You got some kids from Grosse Pointe that never played against kids probably in Grand Rapids. So I wanted to bring all the top talent that I could find and put them in one gym, and then they could play one last high school game.
All right. Well, you did mention Dreamz Two Reality and the thing that you're doing with recruiting stuff. Other than this game, anything else coming up that you can tell us about? And for people who want to find out more, what's the best way for them to do that?
For them to find out, like if you want to purchase tickets or anything, you could go on Eventbrite at just type in Dreamz Two Reality Basketball. On social media like Instagram and Facebook, it's all Dreamz Two Reality Basketball. And I just want everyone just to come out and just have a good time and have a good showing. And let's just put Dreamz Two Reality Basketball All-American game on the map for many years to come.
Yeah, that's Dreamz Two Reality. You spell that dreams with a Z on the end. The 2 is TW0, like the number. The All-American basketball game will be played Saturday at Detroit Catholic Central High School at 4 p.m. in Novi. Roy Jackson, founder of Dreamz Two Reality, thanks so much for joining us on the Metro.
I appreciate you guys.
This is the Metro on 1019 WDET FM. You just heard from Nick Austin. I'm Tia Graham. The Detroit People's Food Co-op is now open. The member-owned grocery store provides customers with fresh produce and gives local grocers and food vendors opportunities to sell their goods. Super excited about the opening of this particular grocery store. Really excited about that as well. Just throwing it in there. Hamtramck Public Schools has a new interim superintendent. The board voted to move the district's head finances into the role last night. Tony Corral is the president of Hamtramck's teacher union, and he told the board that political chaos is hurting her students and staff. So we'll definitely have an update from the newsroom and get filled in on what's going on in Hamtramck and the Hamtramck School District. The forecast for today will be sunny and high, near 73 degrees. There's a chance of rain tomorrow, Friday, before 11 a.m. Otherwise, a high in the 70s. And Saturday, Sunday, we'll see a chance of rain both days, but we'll see temperatures relatively nice. 70, low 70s both days, Saturday and Sunday. Definitely looking forward to that, Nick Austin.
That's right. And also in the world of sports, the Tigers beat the St. Louis Cardinals 4-1 at Comerica Park. Matt Vierling had 2 hits for Detroit, including his 3rd home run of the season. The Tigers head for New York for a 3-game series against the Yankees tomorrow. So you've got that also. Look, tomorrow, baseball, basketball on Saturday, all kinds of sports you're looking forward to this weekend. But coming up on the Metro, we'll talk about cicadas and the weird things they'll be doing this summer. It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. And if you're not a fan of trillions of flying bugs, then you'll probably want to avoid parts of Michigan and parts of America this year. That's because a wave of cicadas is expected to emerge across Illinois, Missouri, and southern parts of Michigan. Think back to 2021 when cicadas invaded Michigan. This year, 2 broods are coming out. To teach us more about cicadas, this rare phenomenon, and what it means as you travel this spring is Hannah Burrack. Hannah is a professor and chair of the Department of Entomology at Michigan State University. Professor Burrack, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you for having me this morning.
Yes. So what are cicadas exactly? I know they're just huge and they fly around.
Yeah, so cicadas are a group of insects. There are over 3,000 known species, but the ones that we're most interested in talking about this summer are the periodic cicadas, which is a group of 7 species that emerge either every 13 or 7 years in massive numbers.
And when we think about this, a lot that I really wanted to talk about, because I've been hearing a lot on social media about it being one of the larger emergences we're going to see in a while, one of those rare phenomena. So what makes this one so rare?
So what makes this one so rare is that 2 of what we call broods of cicadas, so we call these 13-year, 17-year cycles broods, 2 of them are emerging at the same time this year. So there's a brood in the southern United States, which is brood 19, known as the Great Southern Brood, and then brood 13, known as the Northern Illinois Brood. And they don't overlap a whole lot, but what they do is cover almost the entire geographic area of the eastern U.S., kind of south of Michigan and across. And so a large swath of the country is going to be experiencing a periodic cicada emergence. And so that's the thing that is people are very excited about, and for folks who don't like bugs as much or maybe a little apprehensive about.
Yes, and I think about, we had it happen here in Michigan a few years back, and it was just a huge, huge thing. Everyone was talking about it, and I just remember the sound. And so what's so significant about the sound that cicadas make?
Yeah, so that is primarily the male cicadas that are making noise to attract their female partners to mate. And so it's essentially them coming out of the ground, yelling, "Here I am, come and find me. You want to hang out."
So they do this, and we know that, or at least most of us know, but they have short lifespans, life cycles. So they do this, they come out, they emerge every 13 years or 7 years, and they pretty much die pretty quickly.
Yep, so they stay underground as immature cicadas, feeding on tree or shrub roots for those 13 or 17 years, just slowly growing. They come out for 3 to 6 weeks in the beginning of summer, have a wild party, mate, lay eggs, and then all die. And so that's the other thing that folks might notice in periods where we have these mass emergences in locations where they're out, is you also will have a lot of dead cicadas for a period of time that are then breaking down and fertilizing the trees that their little babies are going to develop on over the next 13 or 17 years.
So also giving back. So when I think about cicadas, of course, as we're talking to Hannah Burrack, a professor and chair of the Department of Entomology at Michigan State University. But I think about, of course, some of the things I've been hearing throughout the grapevine, I guess you can say. But just talking about some of the things and the behaviors that we're going to exhibit from some of the cicadas that are emerging this summer. Is it going to be different than what we've seen before?
So it's going to be very similar to the last emergence that was in Michigan, which is brood 10 in 2021. The only real difference for us here in Michigan is that we are probably going to see a very small chance of emergence here from either of these broods. So just across the border in the southwestern part of the state, and more likely in Indiana and Illinois, and certainly in the southern parts of Ohio, are going to experience much larger emergences than we're likely to see here. And so that's going to be kind of the big difference for us locally.
And that was another thing I wanted to talk about, was travel and where people should know to go as they're traveling this summer, or in spring especially, where they're going to see some of these larger presents, especially if you are traveling around the Michigan border, going towards Illinois and Ohio, like you just said. So they will actually run into them there. So just be prepared for that if you are traveling this summer.
particularly if you're going to go camping somewhere. Places like state forests, natural areas, parks are places where we'd expect to see more of them. So if you've got a camping trip planned in, say, southern Ohio or Indiana, that might be a situation where you might be experiencing more and louder populations of cicadas.
Alrighty, everyone should probably be prepared for that. And the last thing I have for you before I let you go, are cicadas harmful to pets or plants or any humans that will encounter them?
So cicadas are essentially not harmful to people or other animals. In fact, they are food for rodents, reptiles, birds. And one of the reasons we think they have these mass emergences is a way of avoiding those predators by having so many come out at once that just by numbers, most of them will survive, and the things that eat them will get very full very quickly. So for animals and people, essentially no risk. They eat plants. They are not interested in feeding on people in any way, shape, or form. And for most plants, they don't pose any threat either. A fully grown tree is going to have no negative impacts of having cicadas feed on it, or the immature stages that are under the ground feeding on them for the next many years. The only situation where you might want to protect your trees if you're in one of these areas that's experiencing a mass emergence is if you just planted some shrubs or bushes or trees, because they do like to lay their eggs, the females, in branches or twigs that are around a pencil size in diameter. So you've got some baby trees that are just starting to get going. You might want to cover them with some row cover, some landscape fabric during that roughly 1 month period of activity, just to make sure that they don't get damaged. But other than that, you should be just fine.
Hannah Burrack is a professor and chair of the Department of Entomology at Michigan State University. Thank you so much for joining us and catching us up on what's going on with cicadas this year.
Thanks for having me.
It is the Metro on 1019 WDET. That was Tia Graham. I am Nick Austin. And transitioning to the world of board games. If you're an avid board game player, I know you're familiar with the big ones like Monopoly, maybe Guess Who, depending on your generation and what you like out there. But for some, they would say one of the big hitters in the world of board games, Settlers of Catan. If you haven't heard about it, it's one to check out. Not only is it very popular, but now might be a great time to get into it because there's a new version out called Catan New Energies. The game's goal is simple: build and develop a modern-day island, but it's got a twist. Players need to do that without over-polluting. NPR's Nate Rod spoke with Emily Kwong about the new board game. They began their conversation by discussing the context in which it is set.
What time period is it set in? Like, is it a situation where modern-day Catanians have a cell phone that needs powering?
Yeah, essentially, yes. So, unlike the original game, which was set in the year 900 or something, modern Catan, much like modern human-occupied Earth, needs energy. It needs power plants. So players have the option of building faster with fossil fuels or slower with renewables. But the catch is that fossil fuels create more pollution.
Oh, this is just like human-occupied Earth.
Yes, it is definitely mirroring society. So pollution doesn't have an immediate effect on the gameplay, which is taking the real-world metaphor even further. It kind of sneaks up on you. So Benjamin Teuber, the game's co-developer, says that imagine you're playing with someone who's like, I don't care about pollution. I want to be aggressive. I want to build fast and get ahead.
Then maybe you do that, and I'll be like, well, I need to grow as well. And then everybody does that. But then suddenly pollution strikes, like an inundation, like flooding, smog.
And this is the key part, Emily.
It doesn't always have to hit the people that actually did it. Sometimes it does, like smog, for example. But then very often, like a flooding just hits everybody, just as we see it. And it doesn't matter who created the pollution. It like affects someone.
That is so parallel to our world today, right? That the people and populations that are being worst affected by climate change are very often the ones who contributed the least.
And Emily, there is a benefit to investing in renewables in the game other than just, feeling good. If the board gets so polluted that it pretty much becomes unplayable, the person who invested the most in renewables wins. So everyone has a collective interest in not over-polluting, and you are kind of constantly negotiating with other players about who gets to pollute and when.
Too bad that's not the case in the real world.
Yeah, tell me about it.
So you said that the new game doesn't mention the word climate change. Like, it's not in the rule book, it's not on the box, even though flooding, because of fossil fueled production, does seem very climate change inspired to me as a game mechanic.
It's a mirror of what's happening with climate change, but it doesn't make that connection explicit, which is, a really big difference from other new climate change-related board games like Daybreak.
Isn't that the cooperative one where you and other players are trying to limit global warming together?
Yeah, exactly. So the makers of that game said they made it to try to get people thinking about how to respond to climate change in a cooperative way. Catan New Energies, this game we're talking about, does not do that. And Benjamin said that was actually an active choice, that they wanted to focus on energy choices and their consequences instead of saying climate change, and then let players kind of just draw their own conclusions.
I think a game is a little world, like a model focused on one topic that you can actually just play without having a severe and bad consequence, and unless divorce is the result. So you can experiment and you can model a little bit how your behavior A or your behavior B could maybe help you better to reach your goal.
Benjamin said that when they workshop this game in beta testing, and even when he's played himself with friends, people often overpollute. There's this human instinct when you're playing a game, and maybe in real life, to kind of win at all costs. But then people would come back and they would feel bad about that, and they would express that remorse. And the next time they would play, people would generally try to build a more balanced energy portfolio.
Oh, interesting. So on a second playthrough, maybe they're investing in renewables and not just going full throttle on fossil fuels.
Exactly. Yeah, they kind of learn a lesson from their prior gameplay.
That was NPR's Nate Rott speaking with Emily Kwong about Catan New Energies. This is The Metro.
This is The Metro. That was Nick Austin. I'm Tia Graham. Coming up, we'll talk about an event happening at Book Suey in Hamtramck about the writer Jane Jacobs. You stay right there.
WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at the University of Detroit Mercy. UDM is offering a new Master of Science degree in ethical leadership focused on sustainable, ethical, and inclusive problem solving. Admission is open to qualified applicants with a bachelor's degree in any field. Course selection is flexible, with no prerequisites, 4 required courses, and 6 electives. Learn more at business.udmercy.edu.
This is The Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. How should we organize our cities? Should we encourage people to close to one another, or to create and engage with one another? Or should we create space between them, leaving more room for privacy? These were hot debates in the 20th century, and one person with a lot of opinions on that topic was Jane Jacobs. The journalist and scholar wrote a lot about many benefits of organized complexity, which allow people to be within reach of each other so they could easily play and create new things, thus advancing our economy. This Saturday at Hamtramck's Book Suey, Idris Muhtar will be giving a talk about Jane Jacobs and her ideas about how cities should be designed. To talk about that now, Idris Muhtar is here. Idris, welcome to The Metro.
Hi, Tia. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So who was Jane Jacobs, and why did you want to give this talk about her on Saturday?
So Jane Jacobs is a really well-known urban activist and writer. She was active in the 50s and 60s And she's really well known for her work opposing freeway projects and urban renewal all across the United States. At the time, we were basically demolishing communities all across the United States, inner city neighborhoods that were sort of your traditional mixed-use, dense neighborhoods, and replacing them with mega projects, sort of single-use housing districts. And she wrote a book called The Death and Life of Great American Cities that she became really famous for. What I want to talk about on the event this weekend is actually getting into some of her writing that followed that book. She's become so famous for writing about urban renewal that I think that her later work gets overlooked, especially her economics writing. And through my reading of her books, especially The Economy of Cities and following books, it's clear that the city of Detroit actually really influenced her writing. And I thought that's a really interesting thing to explore. And so I want to talk about that a little bit this weekend.
Yeah, I love that because as soon as you started to talk about economics and the lack of attention that was put on her ideals and opinions about it, I thought about Martin Luther King Jr. as well with some of his ideals on the economy towards the end of his life and how some of those ideas aren't as necessarily known other than, I have a dream speech. So I think about and I wonder, why are these topics that have been kind of flushed away or kind of looked over when we think about people who've made big impacts and big changes?
I think that her ideas about the city are just, those core concepts from the 60s became so famous that it grabs people's attention. There's some key terms that people get really, feel really good about. The sidewalk ballet she talks about in her book, eyes on the street, some of these sort of catchphrases that get thrown around a lot. But I think that she has some really big ideas about economics and the way that our cities work. And how that's really central to the prosperity of our cities, and why some cities stagnate and why some cities grow and expand.
And what are some examples that she gave, especially when she talked about the city of Detroit,
In Detroit, she talked about, basically, she looked back into the city's history and talked about how from its very beginnings as a settlement in the 1800s through the beginning of the automobile industry, Detroit actually developed a very prosperous, very diverse economy. And it was actually in that process of expansion and sort of concentration on one industry and dependence on that one industry as a growth industry that the city began to stagnate. We started with many, many industries, everything from the paint industry, shipyards, stove industry, pharmaceuticals. There's a lot. I probably couldn't even list them right now. And we lost all of that in the process of our sort of investment in this one industry and in the consolidation of that industry as well. Even within the auto industry, there were over 500 independent auto companies all working on the development of this new technology. But by the end of the 1920s, there were essentially 3 big companies that focused on that work.
Wow. And so she followed that history and she saw the things that were happening and she started to kind of basically raise the red flag or the alarm saying, hey, I think we have an issue here. In what ways can we fix it? So what were some of the solutions that she put in place in order to correct some of these mistakes?
Yeah, so I think that her focus was on the importance of diversifying the economy. Basically it's sort of the natural progression of any economy to, once it gets to a certain size and scale, it starts to export its work to other cities. She observed that with the copper industry in Detroit in the 1880s. Once it reached its capacity in the city and the limit of its work, it eventually moved into the mountain states of Arizona. In the 60s, that's what you saw happen in Detroit with the auto industry, 60s through the 80s and beyond. And we lost a lot of that employment, and there wasn't anything to replace it. So investing in new enterprises, people trying to do new work, sort of this messy and inefficient process of trial and error and development, and getting people to sort of establish new enterprises. So distributing capital is one way of addressing that. She especially talked about the lack of access of capital in the Black community in Detroit. So if business capital is sort of the basis for economic development and getting people to start new enterprises and try new enterprises, and you're blocking off an entire segment of the economy, especially as those populations are moving into the city from the South between the 1920s and beyond, they weren't able to establish new enterprises of their own. And she even said, there was an interview she did with the Free Press in the right after she published The Economy of Cities, Motown is a great example of, when they do have access to capital, and the Black community is able to establish their own enterprises and express their creativity, some really awesome things happen. And it was like a small expression of optimism from her end for the city of Detroit.
I love that too. Oh, I love that. But we are actually talking about Jane Jacobs, who's a journalist and an author and so many other things. And I think about the time frame in which she was working out of. This is my last question I have to ask you, though. So just thinking about Jane and thinking about her life and her time and everything that you've been talking about so far and what you're going to talk about in Hamtramck, I just think about the importance of not only the work that she was doing, but the importance that she was doing it as a woman during the time frame that she was doing it in. I just want you to hit on that a little bit if you can. It's that work that she was doing. Once again, it's just something that, not many people were allowed to do in general, but she was doing it as a woman.
Yeah. I don't know specifically in terms of economics, but I know when she published The Death and Life of Great American Cities, there was this article by Lewis Mumford, a review of her book called Mother Jacobs Home Remedies. Sort of a really today, if we look back at the article title, that just sounds awful.
No, I know.
It's really, derogatory and sort of, I think for that reason, a lot of times people look at her observation of the small scale, sort of the informal networks that are happening on the ground in cities and dismiss it as sort of anecdotal. Mm-hmm. But I think that she had a really strong belief in relationships between people, human capital. I think that these are valuable ideas. And of course, anyone who's putting out ideas that are sort of a rejection of the status quo is going to face those kinds of challenges.
And actually, I got a little more time with you here. So my last question here to you is about Hamtramck. And as you walk around Hamtramck, and you walk with the guests around Hamtramck, what do you want them to take away from the conversation, from the whole entire thing, and especially being in Hamtramck, which is a walkable space and place?
Yeah, so I think that, with the talk, I'm really going to try and express some of the ideas I talked about today. Talk about what her ideas around economics were and how that was influenced by Detroit, sort of really make that Detroit connection. In Hamtramck, I think I'm going to try and look at sites where we're going to look at different businesses in the area and some of the architecture, the layout of the city, and make ties between both the economics and some of her urban planning ideas as well. I think that kind of lends itself well to the walk format. So we'll be doing that after the talk.
I love this so much. Thank you so much. Idris Mukhtar is hosting a talk at Hamtramck's Book Suey about Jane Jacobs, which you just heard all about. That event is happening this Saturday at 3 p.m. Thank you so much for joining us, letting us know who Jane Jacobs is, and continuing to tell her story.
Thank you.
From the roads we drive on to the water we drink, infrastructure is a big part of our daily lives here in Michigan. But as our state looks to upgrade and modernize all this infrastructure, we're facing a major challenge. We don't have enough skilled workers to take these jobs. It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Nick Austin, and you just heard from Tia Graham. And as we transition into the look at infrastructure here, Governor Whitmer recently announced a new initiative aimed at the problem. The goal? Train 5,000 new infrastructure workers by 2030 using a portion of federal funding coming to the state. The goal is to create pathways to good-paying jobs while ensuring our state has the workers it needs to build and maintain critical infrastructure. But what exactly are these infrastructure jobs, and how will this initiative ensure that opportunities are accessible to all Michiganders, especially in communities like Detroit that have been pretty hard hit by the economic challenges we've faced? To help us answer these questions and more, we're joined by Brookings Metro Fellow Joe Kane, an expert on infrastructure and workforce issues. Joe, welcome to the Metro.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you here because I read through all of this stuff and I realized just at the start, I don't even know if we're all on the same page and what an infrastructure job is. So before we get into how to best build them up, is there any general consensus, or what would you classify as an infrastructure job?
Yeah, it's a great question. It goes back to just kind of the lack of consistent definitions, even just on infrastructure itself. And, I've been studying this for going on almost 15 years now. And in that time, there really hasn't been, among the research community, but also among policymakers, there really hasn't been a consistent definition. How I like to define it, though, is we think of physical infrastructure as sort of the foundation, right, for transportation, for water, for energy, for broadband, kind of those being the four main sectors of infrastructure, if you will, and kind of, what is needed to not just construct all of those facilities. So, think of all the workers involved in constructing highways and roads and treatment plants and transmission lines, but also crucially all the workers that are going to be needed to operate and maintain all of these facilities, because construction really is just what I like to call sort of the start of the full life cycle for these projects. And so when we're investing in infrastructure, it isn't just a proposition over the next 2 or 3 years. It's ultimately an investment that's going to last for 10, 20, 30, maybe even 50 or more years. Right, as these assets last over decades to come.
Hearing you mention that, I was talking to the producer for the show, Sam Corey, and he asked if housing was part of that, and I was thinking, well, no. But in hearing your definition, that makes me think these shared resources are more what we might consider infrastructure, as opposed to things that we necessarily rely on, which we rely on housing, but it's not necessarily shared. I don't have you living in my house here.
Right. Well, I mean, I tend to think of, in particular, our publicly owned and operated infrastructure, which is, in the United States anyway, it's transportation and water. But our energy and broadband infrastructure is, in many cases, privately owned and operated. We're paying our internet bills every month and our energy bills or electric bills. And so there's sort of a sharing of responsibilities here. And housing, certainly is part of our built environment. And the skills that are needed by those workers, when you think of not just construction workers, but you think of HVAC technicians, and you think of the various assortment of many skilled trades workers in particular, they're adjacent in many of these fields. And so in as much as we're talking about infrastructure workers for a very long time, we kind of, and by we, I mean like researchers and policymakers, sort of talk about, transportation workers in one corner. We talk about water workers in another corner. And reality is that there's actually a lot of shared skills across these positions, and a lot of potential in that, if we don't have enough talent to do all these jobs, like sort of a common pool of talent, then we're really missing out, right, on the economic opportunity here. And so in as much as there are specific, particular jobs that need to be filled, that's true, and particular, credentials that need to be gained, which is particularly seen through this proposal by Governor Whitmer, the goal has to be, what is going to be the durable talent pipeline, as I like to call it, to fill all types of jobs for years to come.
Well, let's answer that question. 5,000 new workers by 2030. Is it possible?
Sure. I mean, look, and we can look at, Michigan is not alone, of course, in this, and certainly not in this moment, given the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act, this huge pieces of federal legislation that, to our count at Brookings, I mean, it's over $1.2 trillion, over the next decade. And that's being spread all over the country, from not just in Michigan and the Midwest, but the East Coast, the West Coast, the Gulf Coast, the Upper Midwest, rural, urban communities, transportation projects, energy projects. So, by our count, there's about 17 million infrastructure workers currently employed across the country. That's more than 1 out of every 10 workers in the entire labor market, which is kind of surprising to a lot of people. I mean, a lot of these workers, I think, are kind of out of sight, out of mind.
Well,
you might see,
Joe, if I can, what percentage are public versus private sector? And then continue with your thought. But it just made me wonder, like, where would we even look for these workers?
Right. That's a good question, too. We have not run actually specific separate estimates on public versus private, just because, unfortunately, our labor market data at a national level needs improvement, in my opinion, in terms of better forecasting and better, quite honestly, differentiating some of these positions. But by and large, I mean, again, transportation and water infrastructure is, a primary responsibility of state and local government, state departments of transportation, city departments of transportation, local water utilities. But then there are also, of course, many private, construction firms and contractors and, which are very important employers here, too. So there's a whole wide gamut of employers involved here, in addition to workers across many different industries. So that's part of the challenge in this. Is to your question, is 5,000 workers achievable? Yes, but I try to not think so much of the bean counting of this, but more, what are the types of common skills that are going to be needed, not just in the next 5 to 10 years, but again, for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And then are there accessible, flexible pathways by which all types of individuals, including many who have not been finding it very easy to fill these careers. I include, younger workers. Certainly, women have been underrepresented in many of these fields. When we think of the skilled trades, people of color tend to be underrepresented in some of these fields. And this is all coming at a time where we're facing what I like to call sort of a silver tsunami, right? Where there's a retirement crisis too. So much of the current talent that we have is aging or leaving these positions. And so in as much as there's sort of growth potential here, there's also just a need to fill these empty shoes in years to come too. And so to the extent that this effort that Governor Whitmer has put forward sort of creates new jobs, it's also about filling some of those shoes that are going to need to be filled anyway in years to come too.
Well, I have it on good authority. Governor Whitmer's listening right now. Don't ask me for any sources in support of this. But if you were to make a recommendation based on what you've seen from the report, what would you say to lawmakers and how to best implement this strategy so we can scale up our workers here?
Yeah, well, I point to maybe three things. There are many things I could point to. I mean, you're talking to sort of a research guy, but there needs to be accountability on this, right? And so to the extent that you can make a pledge and say we're going to do this and have a target, that's a helpful starting point. But where's the accountability on this? I mean, what are the benchmarks of success, as I like to call it, along the way? Are we counting particular credentials? Are we counting particular jobs being filled? So first and foremost, I do think it starts with having clear metrics and clear accountability of who and how and where these positions are being filled. I think second, I would point to the importance of what are known as sector strategies or sector partnerships. So, many of these jobs don't require a bachelor's degree.
Sure. Can I get the third one real quick? Because we got about 15 seconds.
Yes. And then I would say intentional outreach to those workers who are not represented.
All right. That sounds like a good plan there. Joe Kane, fellow at Brookings Metro. Thanks for joining us on the Metro. No relation.
Thanks.
Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. Just heard from Nick Austin. I'm Tia Graham. Coming up, we'll discuss the attempt to bring back tax incentives for films and TV shows to the state. You stay right there. Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. That was Nick Austin, Nick Austin is here. I'm Tia Graham. And from 2008 to 2015, Michigan had tax incentives for commercial, television, and movie production. Major studio pictures like Transformers and Batman vs. Superman were shot here. I remember going down there during high school and watching that. But Republicans, with the help of then Governor Rick Snyder, stopped providing incentives, citing a lack of return on investment. Now, with Democrats in control in Lansing, the Michigan Film Industry Association hopes to revive tax credits, and with it, the number of productions here in the state. Bill Lutka is a board member on the MFIA's Legislative Action Committee. He told WDET's Russ McNamara what happened in Michigan when the tax incentives went away.
In the brief window when there was tax incentives here in the state of Michigan, it seemed like things were popping up. There were productions happening in the state. There were studios popping up. Did that all basically dry up once the tax credits ended in 2015?
Yes, a lot of it dried up. There's some people that stayed. I moved here in 2008 when the incentive started. I'm from Michigan, but I lived in Los Angeles for 20 years. And when the film incentive happened in 2008, I thought, okay, I can come here and work in Michigan. And I came back and I stayed. There's a handful of people that did. But a lot of the work did go away because, like I said, the producers are really looking for, they have a budget that they have to meet, and they need incentives to make work happen.
It certainly seemed like once the tax credits ended, everything was made in Georgia. And Ontario was taking a lot of those tax credits as well anyway. It seemed like everything moved out of state. Do you have confidence that if those incentives were to return, that the jobs and people looking to shoot here would return?
I think they would definitely return. We had so many good reports from producers all over the world, really, who came to shoot in Michigan during that incentive time back between 2008 and 2015. They love shooting in Michigan. The crews here are great. We could use more people in that business, and more people would move back, and more people would stay. One of the great benefits of having a film incentive is that it retains young people. We have all these universities across the state where people go and they get film and media degrees, but they all have to leave because the jobs are not here. So we have an incredible brain drain that this would help to stem. And Michigan has a population problem. We have a net loss in Michigan. People move out of Michigan. And this is a really good industry to keep young people here in Michigan.
Governor Gretchen Whitmer has made increasing Michigan's population part of her platform. Do you get the sense from the lawmakers that you've talked to that they would be on board with bringing some of these incentives back?
We have a lot of really great bipartisan support for this legislation. Our two bill sponsors in the House, John Roth from up in the Elk Rapids area in northern Michigan, and Jason Hoskins, I believe he's from Southfield, Republican and a Democrat, and they're co-sponsors of the House bill. So we have bipartisan support for this stuff. And the thing about it is that it's a jobs bill. We are talking about bringing all sorts of jobs here. And this is money that would have been spent elsewhere. Why not have them come here and spend it in Michigan and hire Michigan people? It's a win-win.
There have been studies. The Mackinac Center for Public Policy has said that Michigan's has not been getting enough return on their dollar for the incentives. Is this a case where it's not really worth it to the taxpayers of Michigan, or is it more along the lines of, zero is zero? I mean, if you're not bringing productions here to the state of Michigan, there's no money to be had.
There are incentives for all sorts of industries all the time. There's incentives for battery industries and extractive and all sorts of incentives that make jobs happen. And there are some organizations that don't like any incentive, period. This incentive, I've seen with my own eyes how it can grow an economy and grow an entire industry and create jobs and help pay Michigan taxes. So having an incentive it cuts across the entire state because it affects the entire state. There's a lot of production that happens in the Detroit area and in the Grand Rapids area, but I produced projects on that last incentive that were shot in Traverse City and in the Upper Peninsula, in northern Michigan, and it's a really good way to spread the wealth. And once again, this is money that would have been spent elsewhere. So when productions come, they need to have great locations, and Michigan has that. We have diversity. We have good crews. And when they spend money here, it is not just to Hollywood. It doesn't go to Hollywood. It pays people that live here in Michigan, like I live in Michigan. It pays for lumber, and it pays for caterers, and it pays for hotels, and it pays for car rental companies. It really is a way to lift all boats.
That's Michigan's Film Industry Association board member Bill Lutka. He spoke with WDET's Russ McNamara. The MFIA hopes the State House will have a hearing on the Multimedia Jobs Act before the legislature goes on summer break.
That's Tia Graham. I'm Nick Austin, and that's going to do it for the Metro for May 2nd, 2024. You can listen to recent episodes online at WDET.org, and make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
The show is produced by Sam Corey, David Lyons, and Jack Philbrandt, and our engineer is Nate Bender.
The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. If you like what you hear and want to support the Metro, consider becoming a member at WDET.org/donate.
Don't forget, today will be sunny with a high near about 73 degrees, a low around 55. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Thank you so much for listening, and talk to you all tomorrow.
WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM is offering a new master's degree in ethical leadership focused on sustainable, ethical, and inclusive problem solving. More information at business.udmercy.edu.